So this is John Levison for Tri 247. We're in London with Vicky Holland. We're about 3 or 4 days after the opening ITU World Triathlon Series race of the year in Abu Dhabi. You're back to a little bit of a slightly more colder and windy place the way you've just been, Vicky. 8th at the weekend. Just run us through your sort of feedback on how you felt you performed at that first race of the season.
Yeah, I think Abu Dhabi is always a slightly odd race for me. It's so early in the year. Racing in early March isn't something that I'm probably that used to. It's a lot earlier than all the other races, the next one not being until the end of April, and really for me the big aims of the year are coming slightly later on with Yokohama World Series and Tokyo Test Event. Those are the key races for me. So this race was always going to be a little bit of a tester, just to see where I'm at, to have a look at which areas I need to work on, which areas are actually kind of going as bad as well as I could have hoped. And I've taken away some good pointers, I think, from Abu Dhabi. Yeah, I'm a bit disappointed in 8th place. I set myself high standards, and you know, I think especially coming off last season winning the world title, obviously I wanted to start with a bang this year. Realistically, I knew that would be difficult, but there were some really nice little key markers that I noticed. I felt really good in actually how sharp and snappy my transitions were, which is something that definitely takes a little bit longer in the season usually to come good. I think my initial bike power on the bike and that first sort of couple of K on the bike, that was something that I was really pleased with, and has taken me a good few years to get that right. And actually my run, I seemed to get stronger as I went on. I felt really good in the last kilometre and took a few places back to end up in 8th. So there were definitely some really good positives there. I was a bit disappointed in my swim, and that's something that's always an ongoing project for me, and hopefully I'll put myself back in that front pack for the races that matter later in the season.
So last time we spoke, we were out in Jersey at the Super League Triathlon there. That was shortly after you'd won that World Championship. You've now sort of had that, I guess, off-season. Just tell us a little bit about how that went, and how different, or if at all, was that being World Champion in terms of, I guess, additional interest in you, media, sponsors, and probably perhaps other things that we don't know about? Yeah,
I mean, there has been some changes. Obviously there is that fact that you go to a race now and people are looking at you. In Super League I was definitely caught out a little bit, I think, with firstly a bit of the attention that was on me, and also the fact that I'd done a lot of media stuff in those 2 weeks in between the 2 races, and I was sort of winding down for the year. And I've learnt now that you can't go to Super League if you're winding down. It's unbelievable. It's such a great event to be a part of, but it really is, it's brutal, and if you go there underprepared you get caught out, and I definitely found that last year in Jersey. Love to have a go at some more, but I think I'll have to make sure I'm in good shape when I go to them. Going into Abu Dhabi, you know, I'm sort of involved in a few media bits and press conferences, and you know, these are all things that I've done before, but I've never done them as the world champion. And if I'm honest, I didn't find that a stress or something that was distracting me from racing. I thought it's quite an honour and a privilege to stand there as the world #1 and to stand there as the world champion, and I was excited to race as the world champion. And I am a bit disappointed I wasn't, you know, slightly higher up the field at the weekend, but yeah, I'll keep working on that.
One of the other differences with the race in Abu Dhabi is in terms of spectators versus, for example, Leeds. Now, I know that the actual venue itself in Abu Dhabi, I've been there a couple of times myself, it's an incredible venue, but in terms of atmosphere, if we take the example of Hamburg or Leeds, very, very different. How much does that impact you as an athlete, or are you able to sort of put that aside and concentrate fully on your just pure sporting performance?
Yeah, I think with somewhere like Abu Dhabi you have to. You know that there aren't going to be the same crowds as, like you mentioned, somewhere like Leeds or Hamburg, and I don't think you notice it when they're not there, but you really notice it when they are. So the races like Abu Dhabi, I don't expect a crowd, and I don't race for a crowd. I race for me and for my, you know, my goals and my desires of what I want to achieve. But when you do a big race like Leeds is just the big one for me. The unbelievable amount of spectators that are there. You really get this massive boost when you're leading a race in front of a home crowd, and thousands and thousands of people, 4, 5, 6 deep in a crowd. It's unbelievable, and it really is it's a boost, and it's so helpful to us, the athletes, to have that.
Of course, you spent a lot of time in Leeds, so you've got sort of I guess a second home there.
Yeah.
You've now been back in Bath for, I think, maybe about 18 months or so. You can probably correct me if that's
about
not
2 years.
2 years or so. Do you now feel settled? Obviously, that's where you're originally from, or down that area. But in terms of training setup, training partners, is that now sort of home, if you like, for having been based at Leeds for around 4 or so years?
Yeah, so Leeds is, I guess, where my career probably went into its second phase, kicked up a notch, and all my greatest achievements have happened since I moved to Leeds. But since then, you know, now I've been in Bath for a couple of years, and it's still, I guess, a growing centre. We're relatively small compared to the other national training centres, but we've bought a house there, we've got roots there. I mean, my family are about an hour away. We're sort of southwest, both myself and Reese, we're regionally from the southwest. So it does feel like my career's kind of gone full circle, and we've come back to where it all began. As a teenager, I used to use the facilities at Bath when I was a swimmer and a runner, so I know the area quite well. Yeah, we've got our house there now, got some training partners, so no, it does. It feels like Bath is my home now.
And what's sort of day-to-day training in terms of training partners that you would sort of be swimming, biking, running with, and what's the sort of proportion of training in Bath versus training overseas or other training camps away from your home?
Yeah, I think my main training partners, I guess, I train with India Lee quite a lot, so she's my number one training partner, if you like, in terms of what we're doing is the most similar to each other. She's raced World Series level, World Cups, and so she's a great athlete for me to train with, and I think actually our strengths and weaknesses complement each other. I'm a slightly stronger runner, she's a stronger cyclist, so we can really push each other on in those areas. On top of that, we have quite a lot of students who train at the university, some of whom are training with me a little bit more full time now, and having quite a few boys is great just because it gives me the option to run with them. I'm always trying to hang on to the boys in my run sessions, and I think that really helps to push me on. We also train with some long course athletes. We've got athletes like Susie Cheetham, who lives just down the road from me and trains with us as part of the National Centre on a regular basis. So we have quite a variety of athletes that can add to certain sessions here, there and everywhere. In terms of then the training locations, I try to stay in Bath as much as possible. I've always liked training in the UK. I was involved in an international training group for a good 3 years earlier on in my career, but since that point, when that ended in 2012, I've based myself predominantly in the UK. It massively depends on, firstly, the weather conditions. If it's really brutal, then we just get out if we can, and also what we're preparing for. So when there are really hot races coming, we try to go and base ourselves somewhere hot before that. When there are big races happening in the other side of the world, for example, we had 2 massive races in Gold Coast last year. We ended up spending a lot of time over there. So last year was a year where I ended up spending a lot of time abroad. This year probably won't do quite as much. But yeah, with the heat prep that we need to do, knowing what the conditions of Tokyo are likely to be, we'll spend some time in hot places, and I'll also try and do an altitude camp at some point later this summer as well.
Having, looking at your career now, you've got Commonwealth gold, silver, bronze, full set there.
Full set.
World champion, Olympic bronze medalist. You've won World Series. Next year, I think you'll be 34, so really potentially hitting your real prime years. Does that mean that in terms of the rest of your career, there is only one major goal left?
Yeah, it's crazy when you say it all like that. I've got a few things to my name now, and the one missing, I guess, if you like, is that I would love that Olympic title, and I think that's, I almost feel hesitant to say it, but it is true. That is something that I've always dreamed of, and that I will work towards until the day I retire. And I feel like I've probably only really got one more shot at it. You never say never, but I feel like the way I want my career to go is that I give it that one last shot in Tokyo, and hopefully I come out with another medal, and hopefully even more. That's a gold medal. So that is the one big aim now. Yeah.
And obviously it's been the case for a number of years now, but just getting a place on that start line for British athletes, and probably US athletes, women, it's probably in the same position. Is going to be tough. There's 6, 7, 8, maybe more coming. We don't know. Athletes that are all gunning for that. So I guess your focus really, I'm assuming, is going to be Yokohama and the test event this year, which are the selection races.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this year there is I guess, a two-pronged attack. I have got ambitions on trying to retain that world title, and I want to show that it wasn't a fluke freak year, and that I can back that up, and that I validate, I guess, what I've done before. That said, the two key races that I'm definitely aiming to be at my best more than the others are Yokohama and Tokyo. So if I did have to sacrifice performances just a couple of % at one or two other races, then I would do that. So I think it's doable to do both, and to really try and have a great World Series and to qualify for Tokyo. But if I had to prioritise one, then it has to be Tokyo.
Yeah, well, I think we can safely assume that 3 World Series wins last year is not really a fluke.
You can't fluke 3, right?
Not 3. Let's just talk a little extra bit of training. We're here today. I think it's actually going to be me doing a little bit of training. Going to be putting us
I get to coach you today.
through some paces with Polar, one of your sponsors. Obviously, they make fantastic technology, watches, gadgets, GPS, and the like. Obviously, there's lots of talk around data, and do you use loads of it or do you use none of it? What just from your training day to day, are you a total data geek, or where do you sort of fit in that spectrum of using that sort of information to validate your training numbers and processes?
Yeah, well, the first thing to say is that the new Polar watches, the Vantage M and the Vantage V, are really great pieces of kit. The amount of different data sets that you can get from them can almost be overwhelming. There's so much, and what I think is really good is that the watches are for the person who might just want a great looking watch that's a timer, a stopwatch that's a day-to-day look at your clock, that looks good, that's an activity tracker. That's on the basic level of what you could use it for. Or on the flip side of that, you could be using it for absolutely every piece of data under the sun. We're talking from heart rate, paces, we're talking barometric, we're talking power, run power, which is a new thing that's coming in now that I've started to use. So I don't dwell on data too much, and I use it probably more for instant feedback. So when I'm out on a run, I'm looking at my heart rates, and I'm looking to see what zones are, especially with things like undulating hill rep courses when I'm doing a hard session. Those sort of pieces of information are really good because it gives me instant feedback during that training session. All the data then connects onto an app on my phone, on this Polar Flow app, which you can use just to get a broader overview of what your session actually looked like, and where your heart rate maybe spiked during reps, or what actually caused certain things to happen. But I don't try and dwell on it too much. I think there's so much data out there. I think especially with 3 sports to manage, you can potentially overdo it and look too much at it. But I know the key things that I want to look at, whether that's my heart rate zones is probably the biggest one, paces, and as I said, just starting to use the run power now as well.
Good. Well, I look forward to finding out about it in a few moments. So I say I look forward to the state that my running is in at the moment. I'm not sure I do, but thanks once again for spending a little bit of time with us on Tri 247, and good luck for the rest of the year.
Thanks very much.